Hello and welcome to the next instalment and the next lesson of the witch hunts in early modern Europe. We're looking today at the intellectual foundations of the witch hunt. What did the educated classes believe about witches, and how did these beliefs lead to such a huge number of people being accused, interrogated, convicted, executed for the crime of witchcraft? Brian Levak, who I mentioned earlier, really draws out these intellectual foundations as a really crucial cause of the witch hunts and of witch hunting during the early modern period. So we're going to explore why that might have been the case today. And we'll also, it's a nice chance to do some interleaving and some linking back to some of the ideas that were introduced in the first lesson, in the first lecture. Namely the Satanic Pact and the idea of the Witches' Sabbath, which can be very, very, very important today. You have here an illustration or a painting of the Witches' Sabbath by an artist called Heinrich the Younger. A simple kind of Google search for Witches' Sabbath in early modern period. You see a huge number of artistic impressions of what these Witches' Sabbaths might have looked like. And we'll look at some of these images and analyse some of these images in the lecture. And we'll look at one in particular as one of the activities, as a follow-up to this. Put simply, in terms of context, belief in magic and the ability of some people to use magic to cause harm to other people is centuries old, millennia old. It's not new to the 16th century. People in the 16th century believed in magic, believed in people's ability to use magic, but they were by no means the first people to do so. However, by the late 16th century, a key change had occurred in witchcraft beliefs, which would provide what, in Levak's view, is a vital precondition for the period of widespread witch hunting which occurred at this time. What Levak is arguing when he says vital precondition is that without these new beliefs about witchcraft, witch hunting or witch hunt on the scale that we saw in the 16th and 17th centuries would not have taken place. At that time, in that place, in that scale, had important beliefs about witch hunting not changed. The peasantry, as we mentioned in the first lecture, continued to associate witchcraft mainly with harmful magic. The ability of an individual to cause harm using spells or potions. Educated Europeans adapted that view or expanded upon that view. In addition to believing that witches were people that practiced harmful magic, they also believed that witches had entered into a deliberate pact with the devil and were part of a secret, widespread and organised society which aimed at the destruction of Christian civilization. And the Witches' Sabbath is an example of those events where, if you believe some of the demonologists or some of the confession documents from accused witches, at times hundreds of thousands of witches would gather to take part in all kinds of sacrilegious activities, some of which, if you study this image, you'll be able to see taking place. But that's the change, and that's the change that Brian Levak really draws out as being central to the witch hunt taking place in the early modern period. Well, we'll go into a bit more detail on this now. As I mentioned before, we touched on these ideas in lesson 1, but it's worth really understanding the importance of the Satanic Pact and this cumulative concept of witchcraft. Crucial development in elite belief about witches was the belief that witches made a face-to-face pact with the devil. This pact was significant for 2 reasons. Number 1, without this pact, the witch is not able to use magic to cause harm. It is as a result of this pact, this deal with Satan, that they are given their magic powers. Number 2, it acted as an initiation ceremony that brought the witch formally into the devil's presence. And you can see an illustration here from a famous witch hunting manuscript or guide, I suppose, Compendium Maleficarum means like witchcraft, or witches. An illustration of what Garzo, the witch hunter who wrote this book, believes the type of thing that took place. People, defying God by stamping on the cross and committing other kind of blasphemous acts. The witch agrees to reject their Christian faith, often symbolised by trampling on the cross, or sometimes being rebaptised, which seems to be talked about later in the lesson. As a sign of her allegiance or his allegiance, the devil imprinted his distinctive mark on the witch's body, often in a concealed spot. It's why you might have come across the idea of the witch's mark when you may have studied witchcraft in England. This idea that there is a mark that is present on witches, which is a sign of their pact with the devil. At the end of this ceremony, or at the end of after agreeing to this satanic pact, the devil then gives the witch their instructions to the performance of his evil work and gives them the materials that they need: potions, powders, whatever it is, the ability to use magic. And then the witch is sent off back into the community in order to cause harm and to cause suffering and pain in their own communities. You see some images here. These are a more fair illustration of what people at the time thought took place at these pacts. So again, this is from Compendium Maleficarum, and it shows somebody being rebaptised, essentially. And again, this was another aspect of the pact which is brought up quite a lot in witch hunting diaries, the kind of shameful kiss where the person, after making a pact with the devil, kisses his rear end as a sign of their allegiance. And you also get a sense of the numbers of people taking part in these pacts. It's not a solitary crime. The artist, based on what Guazo is saying, makes sure to include multiple people as taking part in witchcraft and taking part in this pact as well. A consequence of this group crime of witchcraft is the second belief, which is the belief in the Sabbath, or gatherings of witches to perform these evil deeds. And you've got another illustration here that we'll look at in more detail. Most well-educated Europeans subscribed to this second belief of the Sabbath, which was that having made this pact, the witches gathered periodically, every now and again, with other witches, to perform a series of heinous, blasphemous, or obscene rituals. The task that you have this week is to look at a description of a witch's Sabbath and match what's going on in the description to what you can see in this image. It's an incredibly detailed, quite rich image of what people believed happened with these Sabbaths, so you might be able to pick out a few details now, but you'll have a closer look at this when we come to the task section. The devil would appear at these meetings. An example of some of the things that are going on: witches would sacrifice babies to the devil and feast on the bodies of murdered children. They would dance naked, engage in sexual intercourse with the devil and other witches, and most terribly of all, they would carry out a parody of the Christian Eucharist, the Christian religious ceremony, and witches using the power of the devil would fly to these meetings. So all kinds of terrible, terrifying crimes and acts would take place in these Sabbaths. And it may be even more terrifying, we'll come to this later on, by the fact that because under torture and interrogation so many of these witches were prompted to give very detailed descriptions of these Sabbaths, which were then read out publicly at their executions, you do start to get a real belief that this is something that was really happening in early modern Europe, spreading through communities. Although, as we mentioned in the first lecture, there's absolutely no evidence that such gatherings ever took place, or even gatherings of people that identified as witches ever took place. Okay, and here's a slightly more close-up image that you can see, and I've picked out a few details for you. You've got kind of like paganised image of Satan there. You've got horned beasts. You've got lesser demons appearing at these Sabbaths, dancing. Bread ground from the bones of unbaptized children is something that comes up in the description of this image. Cannibalism, multiple people flying to events, all types of terrible crimes taking place. served to terrify the educated elites and eventually terrify the peasantry as well, once these descriptions were read out to them at execution. And another image here, just to give you a sense that these artistic impressions of the Sabbaths were not rare. It's quite a common form of artistic expression at this time, in different places rather than in different regions of Europe. The significance of these beliefs in that case. The Great European Witch Hunts, according to Brian Levac, could not therefore have taken place until members of the ruling elite, especially those who created the judiciary, the legal system, subscribe to these beliefs. If there's no belief in the Satanic Pact, if there's no belief in the Sabbath, there is no witch hunt on the scale that we saw at this time. Left alone, the peasantry could not have produced a witch hunt of the scale seen in early modern Europe. The strength behind that argument is based on the fact that peasants saw witchcraft as a solitary crime, an individual using magic to harm another individual. What makes large-scale witch hunts possible is this idea that once you've found one witch, they can be interrogated to name other witches, because other witches were there at these Sabbaths that they attended, or other witches were there when they made this pact with the devil. And once you have this cumulative concept of witchcraft, you have chain reaction trials where one person is forced to name 3 people, those 3 people are forced to name 3 people each, and suddenly the witch hunt gets out of control, and hundreds of people can be accused and sentenced and executed in a very short space of time. In order, therefore, for the intensive hunting of witches to take place, it was necessary for the ruling class to believe that the crime of witchcraft was of the greatest magnitude, and that it was practiced on a large scale and in a conspiratorial or collective manner. Those people in charge of the legal system, kings, princes, bishops, judges, had to believe not only that individual witches were harming their neighbours by magical means, but that large numbers of them were completely rejecting the Christian faith and putting the survival of Christian civilization in Europe at risk. And that really, when we come to get into the mindset of witch hunters and the people that were committing these horrific acts of torture on innocent people, this is the mindset that we have to kind of get into. The fact that they saw themselves as people fighting this, this evil, anti-Christian conspiracy. Without that belief, the witch hunt could never have reached the scale that they were eventually able to reach. Okay, we'll look a bit more detail at the sample as well. The belief that witches made pacts with the devil, again, another central belief amongst the clergy and the secular non-religious elite of early modern Europe. These same individuals also subscribed to another, even more important belief. This was the belief that those witches who made these pacts with the devil also worshipped him collectively and engaged in blasphemous ceremonies known as the Sabbaths, which we saw the images of earlier. Again, we've got yet another image on the right-hand side showing another interpretation of what these Sabbaths look like. And if you look closely, you'll be able to see the manner of sacrilegious and blasphemous acts being committed. Just as the belief in the pact made it imperative that witches be prosecuted, so the belief in the Sabbath led the European authorities to search for the witches' accomplices. And this is, as we mentioned just before, the factor that leads to witch hunts getting out of control and becoming extremely intense in many areas across Europe. And one witch is arrested and is forced to name other witches who are forced to name other witches. That doesn't happen, or that can't happen, unless you believe in these Sabbaths, unless you believe that an accused witch is able to name other witches and accomplices as part of it. These were the beliefs of the educated and literate elite. The ideas mentioned above in previous slides have been fashioned by theologians, philosophers and lawyers, and the men who subscribe to them, the judges, clerics and magistrates. So this is a kind of top-down, people at the top of society believing in these views and ideas and going out and hunting witches on the basis of this understanding. Peasants could gain a limited understanding of these characteristics because descriptions of the Sabbath, work and festivals were read out at trials before people were executed. So these elite beliefs were able to gradually trickle down to the general population, even though, you know, your average peasant in Europe would not read these kind of works of demonology or these theological works about witchcraft. And because trial documents, in particular confessions, were read out, they're able to hear them, and then they're able to adapt their belief in witchcraft based on that. And once these ideas were presented to the peasantry, they accepted them quite quickly. And it's quite easy to see why. The idea of a miserable, poverty-stricken peasant making a deal with the devil in order to improve their life, well, it's something that people could understand. There was a logic there. Life's tough. There's very little I can do about it myself, so I'll make a deal with the devil to try and improve my situation. So it wasn't a huge step for the peasantry to start subscribing to these elite beliefs. An important difference between elite and peasant beliefs, however, lies in the danger that witches pose to society. For peasants, the main concern was the witch's ability to cause harm by occult means, rather than the idea that they formed a pact with the devil. So peasants feared witches, but they feared them as individuals who might be able to harm them, and to cause them physical harm, or to destroy their crops, or to damage their livestock and their animals. The elite see witchcraft as a much bigger, wider, more dangerous, damaging conspiracy. And two, I suppose, most significant authors responsible for some of these beliefs and these arguments, certainly the most notorious witch hunting manual, is the text that you can see in the image there, Malleus Maleficarum, which was first published in 1486 by inquisitors, Dominican inquisitors called Heinrich, Kramer and Jacob Sprenger. These witchcraft treatises, several of these are published. We'll look at some of them in the activities. Had a major role in making the cumulative concept of witchcraft more available to a wider audience. And these texts were written by very educated people. Sprenger, for example, was a professor of theology. He'd also been served as an inquisitor. Where this becomes important, this is something that when we come to look at victims of the witch hunts, women or female victims in particular, we'll look at this text in quite a bit of detail. The Malleus has become notorious for being one of the most openly misogynistic, anti-female texts probably ever written. And there are chapters in this book that go into detail about the kind of supposed moral weakness of women and why that makes it far more easy for them to, or far more likely for them to become witches. And again, it's an example of these intellectual ideas driving the witch hunts and being influential in the witch hunts. The second key primary document, when we look at the start of the witch hunts, is the papal bull of December 1484. A bull is a kind of proclamation made by the Pope. The papal of 1484 was written in response to a request by one of the authors of the Malleus for explicit authority to prosecute witchcraft in Germany. He basically tried to carry out a witch hunt in part of southern Germany, and the local authorities turned him away. It seems to be such a significant problem. And he got annoyed, and he went away and asked for sort of reassurance from the Pope that he was justified in hunting witches and prosecuting witches. The bull, the aim of this is to solve this sort of argument between who has authority in these parts of Germany that you can see at the bottom: Maine, Cologne, Trieste, Salzburg and Bremen. You will read the bull in full as part of the activity, so I'm not going to go into tons of detail about what it says. I suppose it's significant in this. A copy of this papal bull was included in the Malleus Maleficarum, which you saw before. So there's an argument amongst historians, or an interpretation amongst historians, that says, well, by including something that was written by the Pope inside this witch hunting manual, the Malleus Maleficarum, it gave extra importance or extra weight to the Malleus, and therefore meant that its ideas were very influential. Historians debate that, but it's one of the key texts. So it's worth just having a good background of context there, especially because we will read extracts from the Malleus. And as I said, you read the papal bull in full as one of your activities. And the summary of the influence is just there in the last line. A copy of this papal bull was published in the Malleus and appeared to give papal support to the arguments presented by the authors of the Malleus. So all this misogynistic stuff about women appears to have papal authority if you subscribe to the Malleus, which most historians do. The Malleus then, to do a bit more detail on this, it's essentially a manual for inquisitors. It's most notorious for its misogynistic overemphasis on the susceptibility of women to the crime of witchcraft. When we come to look at the inquiry, the second inquiry was witch hunting, woman hunting. The ideas presented in the Malleus and the importance of the Malleus as a guide for witch hunters is a really key argument for the witch hunts being a deliberate attack on women. The book also provided theological, so religious support for the ideas it was advancing. So if you read this text, or when you read extracts of this text later in the course, the authors justify their sort of anti-feminine arguments by using often examples from the Bible. So one they always go back to in the kind of moral weakness of women, according to them, is shown, for example, by Eve being tempted by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And they use examples like that to kind of prove that it's easier for the devil to trick women because he was able to trick Eve. So there's an awful lot of stereotyping and generalisations about women that goes on in this book to justify the author's claim that women are very susceptible to the devil and therefore very likely to become witches. There are other important parts of this text. There's legal advice on how to bring witches to trial, and also guidance on how to interrogate witches as well. The apparent approval of the Malleus from the papal bull that we've just mentioned, that was included in the book and which appeared to endorse the views of its authors, may have added to its author. Again, there is a little bit of debate amongst historians about just how influential this text was, but I don't think there's many historians who would deny that the Malleus Maleficarum was a very crucial factor in educating European elites on witchcraft and how it should be prosecuted and why it was so dangerous. They weren't the only people that wrote works of demonology. If you studied Macbeth, you'll know that James I also wrote a book on demonology, so even kings and rulers were involved in this at times. Other contemporary experts on witchcraft that you'll come across as part of this course are just listed here. And Francesco Guazzo, we will look at his view on the crimes committed by witchcraft. At one of the activities, we saw an extract from Henry Boget's in the first lesson. So these are some names that hopefully you'll become familiar with as the course progresses. But that's the intellectual foundations of the witch hunts, I suppose. And it's worth just summarising that these intellectual foundations are based on two new beliefs about witchcraft and the role of witches. Number one, that they made a satanic pact with the devil. And number two, that they attended Sabbaths or gatherings of witches. And the significance of those two developments. Number one, witchcraft is not just an act of harmful magic, it is a sacrilegious, heretical act, which involves a pact with the devil. And number two, it is not a solitary crime. It is a crime that is part of a much wider, more dangerous, more damaging conspiracy to undermine Christian civilization. And it's these two beliefs that many historians argue were a fundamental cause, a crucial cause of the witch hunt, and help to explain why they occurred in Europe at this particular time. Okay, that's it on the lecture front, so have a look through the activities for this week, and I hope you enjoy them, and I'll see you in the next lesson.